Hell, I suppose this is the Patreon post I made earlier in video format, and unfortunately, it's not bringing good news. To rip the band-aid right off, Spark is pretty much going on an indefinite hiatus for the time being. There's different aspects that led me to making that decision, and I just wanted to go over them with you real quick. First is the emotional aspect. I've been struggling with my mental health for the past 2 years, which is summed up by grieving pretty much the loss of my whole family. After my mother's death in 2023, my whole family splintered. I haven't seen my dad in months, and my brother has just cut me off altogether, alongside the loss of 3 pets I had for 2/3 of my life. And on top of that, last year I moved twice, pretty much against my will. There's a housing crisis in the Netherlands, and I was risking going homeless, so I had to accept a tiny rundown apartment in a right-wing small town 200 kilometers away from my home. And if that wasn't bad enough, my downstairs neighbor loves to keep me up at night, and my landlord has been absolutely useless. So the first half of the year I was more focused on trying to find another new place to live than Swiss Park, and that's led to guilt in both aspects because I have made barely any progress on Swiss Park, but I also have yet to find a new place. However, I wish that sleepless nights and loneliness were the only issue in this matter. The second aspect is finances. I applied to animation jobs for 2.5 years straight, but never got even a single offer. So instead, I turned to doing freelance work for non-business customers. And that means I'm a sole proprietor in the Netherlands, and this means they look at the profit I make as a freelancer rather than my turnover, which is everything I make. In some cases, that's really neat because you get certain income tax cuts, but it also has downsides. And one of those downsides is, let's pretend you make 35,000 euros a year, and you have an indie animation series you spend 10,000 euros on in a year. That means you have 25,000 euros in profit. Most banks and private landlords use the average of 3 years of profit to determine how high your mortgage or your rent can be. Generally, a mortgage will be 4 times your income, of course dependent on any personal or student loans you might have, and the maximum rent you can afford will be your monthly income divided by 4. So for that 25k, that would be a 100k mortgage, or 25k divided by 12 divided by 4 is 520 euros in rent. Whereas if you don't spend that 10k on that indie project, that's 40k more on your mortgage, and 200 or more you can spend on rent. And then there's social housing, which is government subsidized housing. That doesn't look at your profit, but at your taxable income. As a sole proprietor, you get a portion of your income tax-free, and since you take care of your own pension and disability insurance, you get to subtract that from your taxable income. So the income that's looked at for social housing is usually even lower than your profit. Sometimes they'll make an exception, but that differs per housing corporation, and a single city can have more than 5. So even that is basically luck of the draw, whether they look at your taxable income or are willing to make an exception based on your profit. Generally, anyone that makes less than 50k annually is subject to social housing, which then is also divided in 3 income tiers. And I'm in the lowest one, even based on my revenue, let alone on my taxable income. The lower the income, the less availability in terms of housing, and especially the less favorable the pickings are. Old, poorly insulated, that sort of thing. I've been looking for a place near my home the past 6 months, and there's no way I can afford private renting with my earnings. And the social housing crisis is serious. I've come to realize that if I want to have a better chance at finding something back home within the next 2 to 5 years, I'll need to get into at least the next income tier, if not just straight up enough to buy. Considering my revenue alone is currently below the upper limit of the lowest income tier, it's not even just as simple as not spending anything. I straight up have to make more and not spend anything. So you kind of get the issue here, probably. Hopefully I've made it no secret that Swiss Spark was never about the profit. My intent was to keep funneling whatever spare income I would have, whether it were from the series or from freelance income, back into Swiss Spark until I considered it fully funded. But I made that plan before knowing I'd get kicked out of my house into some right-wing garbage dump. Now things are different, and this is important. This comes before a dream or a hobby, and I hope you understand that. One big downside on top of all of this is that I recently lost a lot of revenue due to a certain kind of content being cracked down on the internet, so I lost nearly 1k of my monthly income thanks to that. So my primary focus is getting that back to where it was first. And in addition, I'm just limiting myself to only 10% of my revenue going back into business expenses until I find a good place to live. And that could take years for all I know. But until then, I want to spend as little as possible to just get my income up and increase my chances of getting a new place that doesn't absolutely suck balls like this one. That being said, I want to make absolutely clear that the voice acting for the 5 episodes that I've been working on for the past year now will be done. I have a plan for that, it's happening, it's just at a slower pace, so I can adhere myself to that 10% rule. Unfortunately, I do think I'll have to skip out on the music for these episodes, that including the background score, because it would be another 10 to 15k to get that done, and with the 10% rule limiting me to roughly $2,500 to $3,000, you can do the math. I personally think it would be best to leave these episodes as voiced storyboards, as that goes best with a no music vibe, like just completely unfinished vibe, but I'll see. The comic, I'm currently working on pages 40 to 50 of episode 2, and that's page 50 out of 90, so around the halfway point. And when I'm done with that, probably sometime around the end of the year, I'll put the comic on hiatus and work through the remaining storyboards for those episodes. So Patreon will be switching back to storyboard updates from the comic, and the public release version of the comic will keep going until we run out of pages and then go on hiatus. And after I finish those boards, I should be able to release them, but I'm not giving a release date because I'm officially treating this as a hobby, which just means no pressure. No more dates, no more deadlines, no more nothing. Just, get my job, as I call it, back on track first. Get my life back on track first. Then we can look back at reintroducing this as maybe more than a hobby again. Because I'm not sure if you guys have noticed, but I did an oopsie by not uploading anything or posting to my community tab for 6 months, and YouTube kicked me out of the partner program after 8 years. So, no more YouTube monetization either. But I guess the upside of that meant I was finally able to make an animatic with a copyrighted song I liked, which was One Way Dream. So every cloud has a silver lining type situation, I suppose. And I just wanted to close off this video with what I know you may be thinking: why don't you work with volunteers? And I'll probably put my full thoughts on the matter in a separate video, but I suppose the whole too long didn't listen of that spiel is that I don't work with volunteers because I personally don't feel comfortable doing it. I feel like I'd be exploiting other people's talents for personal gain. SwiftSpark was mainly about proving something to myself. Back when I was 14, that I could make a comic, and when I was 19, that I could, in fact, make a pilot of my own, and I did. The next thing on that list was to prove that I could build a career off of SwiftSpark, and I guess that's where I was wrong. But regardless, it was still an incredible opportunity. I got to work with some childhood heroes, made some wonderful new connections, and bolstered my animation abilities to new heights. What I'm trying to say is, not all is lost, and I'll be back someday. For now, however, life takes priority. You guys will still be getting your episodes, just not as fancy as I would have liked them to be. And I get to say I made something. I made it exist. And I'll make it good later. I promise.